Hello writer, and welcome back to my life. Writer Wednesday, the day I give you my best tips and advice on the art and the business of writing and tell you how I do what I do as an indie author. Today I want to talk to you about tension. It's one of the most talked about topics when it comes to storytelling, both in books and in other media like film and television. But what the hell is tension anyway? Tension is nothing more and nothing less than expectation, the anticipation that something is going to happen. This is the primary principle of tension. From this simple principle, you can extrapolate all the literally billions of ways tension has been created in every story told since the beginning of time. But Garrett, you say, it can't just be expectation. Sometimes you don't know what to expect. Sometimes you don't know what's going on, but the scene is still tense. The first thing you should know about tension is that a scene has absolutely no tension if the reader doesn't expect anything is going to occur. There is both known tension, the reader anticipating something they know is going to happen, and unknown tension, where the reader knows something is going to happen, but they don't know what. It's not always an expectation in the sense that the reader always knows what's going to happen, just that they know something big is about to occur. Whether it's a personal falling out between two characters, or an atom bomb going off under a crowded sports stadium. Which brings us to the fact that there are countless different types of tension, and the type of tension you should be giving your reader often depends on your genre. An entire romance novel depends on the tension, that is the expectation, that the main characters are going to get together, euphemistically or otherwise. But on a smaller scale within that romance novel, there might be dozens or hundreds of smaller tensions. The expectation that there will be a fight between the main characters, the expectation that there will be a misunderstanding between one of the protagonists and their best friend. In my own genre of epic fantasy, each book's tension depends on the expectation that the hero will reach the end of their quest and either succeed or fail at. But there are smaller tensions here as well, the expectations of a fight between the hero and one of the villain's minions, the expectations of whether they'll gain the favor of a king or other powerful figure. And often in fantasy, in fact often in most genres, there's also a romantic subplot which carries similar tension or expectation that the protagonist will have a relationship with their love interest. It's just that in other genres this is a subplot, whereas in romance it's the main plot. So the second thing to know about tension is that you've got to know what sort of expectations the reader of your genre is likely to care about and be interested in. This is a subset of knowing the tropes of the genre you're writing in, because virtually all reader expectations are based on the tropes of the genre they're familiar with and enjoy reading. Now we hear a lot about rising tension and falling tension. What the hell is that all about? Rising tension just means increasing expectation in the reader, and the third thing to know about tension is that you can raise it in one of two ways, either by increasing the degree of anticipation or adding a new thing to also anticipate. So let's say it's a spy novel, and the secret agent just discovered that the villain has captured her father and is holding him hostage, and she's going to rescue him. You could cause rising tension in that scenario by having the spy discover that her father's on heart medication, and if she doesn't get it to him in a certain amount of time, he's going to die before she can rescue him. That's raising tension by increasing the existing tension. Or you could raise tension by having the spy discover that there's a chemical nerve agent about to be released in the building where her father is being held, completely unbeknown to her father or the villain who's holding him. That's raising tension by adding a new source of tension. You see that? One requires her to act faster or more desperately or with less preparation than she was going to have originally, and the other requires her to figure out a whole new solution to a new problem. Okay, so what about falling tension? This means a drop in expectation, right? Why would you ever want to do that when people are always telling you to raise tension in your story? And yet, if the tension is always rising, never falling, your book becomes exhausting, and honestly, it becomes a bit boring. There's a rhythm to tension. Just like in music, if it's all noise all the time with no rise or fall or silence in between notes, your reader ends up not satisfied, but weary. Usually the best way to let tension fall is with a climax of existing tension, a thrilling conclusion to a fight, an awesome victory, or a crushing defeat. The immediate danger or drama has passed, and the reader gets a moment to breathe. This is where you put in character moments and world building, something to keep them occupied while you lay the stage for the future tension you're going to build in your story. So the fourth thing to know about tension is that you have to release the pressure valve every once in a while, so the reader can have some time to think about what they've just experienced, and so you can start laying the groundwork for future tension. There is another way you can drop tension, and that's to temporarily drop tension without a climax, leaving the reader feeling vaguely dissatisfied, only to then immediately hit them with the climax just when they thought they were safe. You see this most commonly in the horror genre, where in film it's called the double jump scare, although it does have its appearance in other genres as well, but use it sparingly because the reader starts to resent it after a while. Alright, now looping back to something we talked about near the beginning of the video, the fifth thing to know about tension is that tension can be based on the reader wondering what's going to happen, but knowing something is going to happen, or it can be based on the fact that the reader knows what's going to happen, but the consequences of the result are unknown. unknown. They don't know exactly when it's going to happen, or they don't know how the character is going to react. A key component of tension is uncertainty. You have to balance in your story the certainty that something is going to happen with either some uncertainty about what is going to happen or some uncertainty about what the result of the climax will be. Because on the flip side of the coin, there is absolutely no tension if the reader is expecting exactly what's going to happen and then exactly that thing happens exactly the way they thought it would. Here's a personal anecdote for illustration. Spoiler warning for Game of Thrones, but if you're watching this, I'm assuming you're mostly caught up on that. When I read A Song of Ice and Fire, the end of the first book had a tremendous amount of tension. It looked like Ned Stark was going to die, but he couldn't die. He was the protagonist. That doesn't happen in epic fantasy novels. I had the expectation that Ned Stark was going to survive, but I was uncertain about exactly how he was going to escape and what was going to happen afterwards. And then he died. Holy shit! So in that case, my expectation was actually broken, which is a very tricky thing to do as a writer, because if you shatter the reader's expectations in the wrong way, you can really upset them, and not in the good way, that sort of upset that makes readers tell their friends, "I absolutely hate this book. Here, you have to read it." So the sixth thing to know about tension is that if you're going to break the reader's expectation, you have to do it in a way that is consistent with what you foreshadowed earlier in your work through character development and world building. And you have to provide enough of an emotionally impactful resolution to the tension that it replaces and makes up for the emotional release your reader was expecting. So let's take the flip side of the coin in the same series. The Red Wedding. In the third book, the story started building towards the Red Wedding, and it was just very, very obvious that Robb Stark was gonna die. Like they said in the book, oh, if you eat Walder Frey's bread and salt, you're a guest and he can't hurt you. But that was so obviously wrong because of all the world building that had been done to establish Westeros as a terrible place where terrible people did terrible things all the time, no matter what the rules were. So because it was so obvious, and because last time Martin had completely surprised me, I now had the expectation that it was a double fake out, that somehow Robb was going to survive because it was just too obvious that he was going to die. And then he just died. In exactly the way I had expected him to. And you might say, well, that's just in keeping with the world building that was already established. And it was, but it was not, in my opinion, in keeping with the character development that had also been established. Because the whole time, Robb, and especially Catelyn Stark, were acting like total idiots, thinking that the rules of social order would protect them, when that had never been seen to be the case in this story. Though I was expecting the Red Wedding, it was completely unsatisfying as a reader, because it was not surprising and it was completely avoidable. Which brings us to the seventh thing to know about tension. Each climax should strive to be in some way surprising and at the same time inevitable. There needs to be something in each climax that your reader did not expect, but which in retrospect seemed like it was destined or fated to happen. And you make it inevitable by seeding it in the earlier story, so that when they look back, they say, oh, of course that happened. Because of what happened earlier, it couldn't have gone any other way. And this is the trickiest bit of managing tension. Establishing the resolution of each climax without making it blatantly obvious to your readers so that they aren't in any way surprised. And this checklist of 7 things to know about tension is something I'm always considering in every scene and across my book as a whole. Tension is a vital part of your writing toolset. It's what keeps a reader turning pages, and it's what makes them pick up your next book after they've finished the first one. That's all I've got for you today, writer. A reminder that my $5 patrons on Patreon get these videos 2 weeks in advance of everyone else, and they're also the only ones who can ask me questions to cover in future videos. If you want to be one of those awesome and incredibly attractive individuals, click the Patreon link, which should be on your screen right now. You can also pick up the Writer Wednesday t-shirt. It tells people you're a writer so you don't have to. Either way, I really appreciate the support. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye!